scream. The ship had started to roll, its sides creaking, the roar of the engine a deep, unfamiliar resonance. For a moment, Maisie braced herself against the wall and clung to the handrail. "The lady sounds very distressed. Do you think she might require a doctor?" "Hysteria would be my diagnosis," the steward said matter-of-factly. "Happens every voyage as soon as we set sail." "But aren't you going to check, just to be sure nothing is seriously wrong?" He doled out his opinion. "Not much point. There's no pill that can cure her of this ailment. When she realises she's not going to drown, she'll stop. Simple as that. Now, here you are, miss." He took a step forward and knocked on the door, his touch surprisingly light. Maisie mumbled her thanks and tried to ignore the persistent screaming. The door opened inwards and a stout, big-jawed woman with a helmet of crinkly platinum hair appeared in the doorway. The woman raised her eyebrows over steel-rimmed spectacles as the steward loitered. "No need to stand there, steward," she said, her clipped English poorly disguising her Australian vowels. "You have already received your tip." The man sniffed, but held her gaze for a fraction longer than was strictly polite before stepping away. Maisie's shock at his boldness shrank her voice to a croak. "Mrs. Wallace?" "Pompous little pipsqueak," Mrs. Wallace said, loud enough for him to overhear. "Put an ordinary man in a uniform and he thinks he commands an army." She stepped to one side and gestured Maisie in. "Come on, dear. We may as well get acquainted. We are to be roommates for the next couple of months, after all." Mrs. Wallace was, Maisie understood, related to a friend of her mother. She had a tone of address which might easily have rivalled that of a major general. Though the older woman had been paid handsomely for her chaperoning services, her connection to home was of some comfort to Maisie, and she very much hoped they would get along. Maisie looked round the tiny cabin. The room was spare and had a strong, clean smell like pine trees. She took in the white, rivet-studded walls, the little hand basin and tap concealed in a coffin-like upright stand in one corner, and the crisp linen sheets folded flat on the bunk beds, which were separated by a short ladder hooked over the footrail. "What's the matter, dear?" Mrs. Wallace asked. "You don't look very happy." Maisie tried to rearrange her expression into a smile. "It's just, well, this is not quite what I was expecting." Mrs. Wallace blinked several times. "In what way exactly?" I've never shared sleeping quarters before. It seems a very small space for two people, especially in first class." Mrs. Wallace smiled. "You can't buy something that is not for sale, Maisie. Not even your parents, for all their money and influence. There are very few single-berth cabins on this steamship, and you were simply too late to secure one." "Oh, dear," Maisie faltered. "And there is no window. How shall we get fresh air?" Mrs. Wallace wagged a finger. "You'll be very pleased when the weather turns foul, just mark my words. You wouldn't want seawater sluicing you in the middle of the night. Now buck up, dear. You need to have a wash and change for dinner." Maisie froze as confusion overtook her. Was she supposed to undress there and then, in front of Mrs. Wallace, whom she'd only just met? Maisie stared at the floor, fingering the top button of her jacket, aware that her eyes had become slightly damp. Mrs. Wallace coughed 2 or 3 times, as if she understood the awkwardness of the situation. "Would you like the cabin to yourself while you change your clothes?" Maisie nodded, pulling out the sharp, pearl-tipped pin from her hat and tossing it onto the bottom bunk. Almost before it had landed, Maisie snatched it back up again and glanced at Mrs. Wallace. "Put it on the chair, dear," Mrs. Wallace instructed. "We are going to have to learn to dance round each other, aren't we?" the older woman quipped brightly. "There isn't enough room to unpack everything, so you will have to use your trunk as a sort of auxiliary chest of drawers."